Hi everybody, in this YouTube tutorial what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to use the phpMyAdmin tool. The phpMyAdmin tool is a tool that comes bundled with WAMP and MAMP, and it has a graphical user interface accessible through a web browser that allows you to interface with the MySQL database management system to do things like create a database, to create tables in a database, to add records of data to tables in a database, to update records of data, to delete records of data. It even has facilities that allow you to delete tables from a database, and for that matter even drop an entire database. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this YouTube tutorial. We're going to create a database, we're going to create a table in it, we're going to add a few records of data, update a record or two of data, delete the data, then drop the table, and then drop the entire database. Now, at various points throughout the tutorial, I'm going to ask you to take screenshots. You're going to want to make sure that you save those screenshots because they're going to be part of your deliverable for this assignment. So pay particular attention to the spots where I ask you to take a screenshot. Okay? Now, to start up the phpMyAdmin tool, you first have to have WAMP or MAMP running. Okay, you first have to have WAMP or MAMP running. Then what you can do is you can go to the quick launch icon for either WAMP or MAMP, okay, and bring up the main menu. And in the main menu, if you scroll to the top, you should see a button for phpMyAdmin. Okay. Well, what you want to do is you want to push on that button, and what's going to happen is the phpMyAdmin tool is going to load. And whatever your default browser is for WAMP or MAMP, mine happens to be Firefox, okay? But the phpMyAdmin tool is going to load in your default browser. And this is exactly what it's going to look like. Okay, you can see that it's a web user interface. Okay, and this is the home page. So let's talk a little bit about it. On the left-hand side of the page, okay, there's an area, okay, that lists all of the databases that currently exist in MySQL. So I have databases for ABC Corporation, for Area, Catalog, Information Schema, MySQL, Performance Schema, Test, and VC. Now, you probably don't have all of these databases. I would suspect that you probably have a few of them, but you don't have all of them, and that's okay. You haven't created them yet. Okay? What we're going to be doing today is create another database in MySQL. Okay? But all of the databases that currently exist in MySQL on your local machine will be listed on the left-hand side of this page. Across the top of this page are various buttons that allow you to perform different functions in the phpMyAdmin tool. For example, there's a button for databases that if you push, and we're going to push this button in just a few seconds, but if you push it, it allows you to begin the creation of a database. There's another button for SQL that if you push, it allows you to implement various SQL statements and execute those statements. There's another button a little bit to the right that says export. We're going to use that button a little bit later on, and what that allows you to do is export an SQL file of your database and its tables. Okay, so across the top of the phpMyAdmin tool, different buttons that allow you to perform various functions. Okay, so we're going to get started with the creation of our first database. So I'd like to ask you to push the databases button, and it's going to bring you to a page that looks something similar to this. Okay, now at the bottom, or maybe more the center of this page, again you can see a listing of all of the different databases that exist in MySQL. Okay, but what we're going to do sort of towards the top of this page is we're going to begin creating our first database, and really all that's required is that you put in the name of the database, and our database is going to be named Registrar. R-E-G-I-S-T-R-A-R, Registrar. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And then you push the Create button, and the phpMyAdmin tool will create that database for you. And as a matter of fact, on the left-hand side of the page, you should see that database listed. And also, in the center of the page, you should see the database listed. Okay, now all we have at this point is a database. We haven't created any tables in it yet, but we have the database set up. Okay, now I'd like to ask you to take a screenshot of this page illustrating the registrar database. The next step is to create a table in that database. We're going to do that next. To create a table, first what you have to do is go into the database. So on the left-hand side of the page where it says registrar, and by the way, these are all hyperlinks, I'd like you to push the registrar hyperlink, and that's going to bring you to a page that looks something similar to this. On this page, what we're going to do is we're going to give our table that we're going to create a name, and we're going to specify how many columns are going to exist in the table. Okay. Now, the name of our table is going to be course, C-O-U-R-S-E, the course table, and it's going to have 4 columns. And that's all you have to specify on this page: the name of the table and the number of columns. And then you can push on the go button. And that's going to bring you to a page that looks something similar to this. Now, in this page, what we're going to do is we're going to specify the characteristics for each of the columns in the table. Okay? And the different characteristics of the column that we're going to specify are its name, its type, meaning its data type. Is it going to be an int? Is it going to be a varchar? Is it going to be a text field? Is it going to be a date? Okay, there are a number of different data types that you can specify in association with a column. You can see I'm scrolling through the full list. Okay, though I would suspect that most of our columns are going to be either int, varchar, text, or date. Okay, you can also specify the length of a particular column, meaning how many characters of data will it contain. You can specify if it's going to have a default value. You can specify if it can be null or not null. You can specify if it's a primary key, if it's an index, if it's a unique index. You can specify if it should auto increment. Okay, so in this particular page, what we're going to do is we're going to set up the columns that are going to exist in our table, and we're going to specify their characteristics. Okay, so the first column in our table is going to be named course ID. Okay, and its type is going to be varchar. Varchar is sort of like a string. Okay, you can think of it in those terms. Its length is going to be 8 characters. It's not going to have any default value. We're going to allow it to be null, okay, and it is going to be the primary key, and it's not going to auto increment. Okay, that's our first column. The second column is going to be called course name, and it's going to be a varchar. Its length will be 25, and that's all we're going to specify. Those are the only characteristics that we're going to specify for this column. The next column's name is going to be section. It too is going to be a varchar. Its length is going to be 1, and that's it. That's all we're going to specify for this column too. The next column we're going to specify is instructor. This column is going to be a varchar as well, and its length is going to be 35. And that's it. That's all we're going to specify. Those are the only characteristics that we're going to specify for the instructor column. Okay, so 4 columns. There we've set them all up. Now I'd like to ask you to take a screenshot of this slide. Once you have all of your columns set up, then what you can do is you can push on the Save button, and your table will be created. Okay. Now, you can see on this page that's loading at the top our table. Okay. And you can also see it listed on the left-hand side of the page as well. There's the course table. Okay, so we've created a table. But now what I would like to do is I would like to see the structure of that table. Okay, so at the top of the page, what you can do is you can push on the structure button, and that illustrates the structure of the table. It lists the columns for you, the course ID, the course name, the section, the instructor. It illustrates the type of the columns, varchar. Okay. It also illustrates that this first column happens to be a primary key. Okay. So it lists the structure of the table for you. Now, if for whatever reason you had to change the structure of a table, you could do that. Okay, you could do that from this page. Okay, what you do is you would select the column that you want to change the structure of, you check it, okay, and then you push the change button. And that's going to bring up a page that looks something like this. So if we wanted to change the structure of this column, let's say from a varchar, okay, to an int, an integer, a number, we could do that right here. If we also wanted to specify that this particular column can auto increment, we could do that. We could say that it will auto increment, and then we could save our changes. So I'd like you to make those changes. I'd like you to change the course ID from a varchar to an int, and I'd also like you to specify that it will auto increment, and then push on the save button. But first, before you push on the save button, take a screenshot of this page and then push on save. And that's going to take you back to the page that illustrates the structure of the table, and you can see that the type is now int, and you can see that that column is now going to auto increment. If you wanted to drop a column from a table, you could do that. For example, maybe we want to drop the instructor column. We select that column from the table, and we go down and we push the drop button. And a screen like this is going to pop up. You're being prompted. Do you really want to execute the following query? Dropping that column. And you can click on yes, but before you do, I would like you to get a screenshot of this page. But then after you get a screenshot, push on the yes button, and it takes you back to the page that illustrates the structure of the table, and you can see that that particular column is gone now. Okay, so we've created our database. We've created a table in that database. We've altered the structure of the table, okay, a couple of times. But now what we want to do is we want to insert some data into the table. Okay, so let's do that next. Okay, and to do that, at the top of this page, you want to push the insert button. It's going to bring you to a page that looks something like this. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to plug some data into this page. Okay, for the course name, we're going to plug in the following data. Intro to Java. For the section, we're going to type in an uppercase A. Okay, then we're going to go down, okay, on the page, and for the course name, we're going to plug in intro to OO, and then down below that, we're going to plug in a B for the section. Now, what's going to happen is 2 rows of data, 2 records of data are going to be inserted into our table. Okay, this page, when it initially loads, gives you the facilities to insert 2 records of data. At the top, we have 1 record, and at the bottom, we have another record of data. Now, you might be asking, how come we didn't insert anything into the course ID columns? Okay, well, we didn't insert anything into the course ID columns because the course ID auto increments, which means that anytime a new record of data is inserted into the table, MySQL will automatically generate a number for us, and that number that it generates will always be unique. Okay, so now that we have this data plugged into the insert page, what we're going to do at the bottom is we're going to push the go button. But before you do that, I would like you to take a screenshot of this page. Take a screenshot of this page. And then I would like you to push go. Okay, and the next page that loads at the top should say 2 rows inserted, and that's good. Okay, that's the way we want it to be. That's what we were trying to do. We were trying to insert 2 records of data. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to take a look at that data in the table. Okay, we want to examine it. So what you can do at the top of the phpMyAdmin tool again, you can push the browse button, and that allows you to take a look at the data that's currently in the table. And there you can see the 2 records of data. Okay, and notice how the course ID was automatically generated for us by MySQL. The first row of data has a course ID of 1, and the second row of data has a course ID of 2. And the other data that you see was the data that we plugged in ourselves. Okay, so 2 records of data we just added. Now let's say we wanted to edit some of the data that's in the table, update it. Well, we can do that. What we can do is we can check the column that we want to update and then push the change button. Okay, and that brings you to a page that looks like that. And there is the data that we had previously entered. Well, maybe we want to change the course name from Intro to Java to Web Programming. And maybe we want to change the section from A to C. We can do that on this page. Okay, I'd like you to get a screenshot of this page, save it off, and then after you've done that, push the go button. And that takes you back to this browse page where you can see that the updates that you made to the data are reflected. We now have the first course named Web Programming, and its section is C. Okay. Now, if we wanted to delete a row of data, we could do that as well. Again, you can check the row that you want to delete, and then you can push on the delete button, and it's going to bring up a window that looks like this, asking you, do you really want to delete that data? Okay, and we do. We're going to push the yes button, but before we do, okay, I would like you to get a screenshot of this window. Okay, so now we're going to push yes. We really do want to delete that data. Okay, so now the data is gone. Okay, only 1 row of data in the table. We could insert another row if we wanted to. We could insert 2 or 3 rows if we wanted to. We could go back and insert more data, but we're not going to for now, though you could if you wanted to. What we're going to do now, and this is pretty interesting, okay, is we're going to export the SQL that could be used to create this database, create the table in it, and insert the data into the table. Okay, and this is pretty interesting. So what I'd like to ask you to do is make sure that you have the registrar database selected. Okay, you want to make sure that that registrar database is selected over on the left-hand side of the page. Make sure that it's selected. Okay, and then what I want to ask you to do is push the export button. And it's going to bring you to a page that looks like this. And at the top, it should say exporting tables from registrar database. If it doesn't say that for you, make sure that you push the registrar database again and then go back into export, because that's what we want to export everything, the database, the tables, the data, the whole kit and caboodle. So make sure it says exporting tables from registrar database. And then all you want to do, you want to leave everything else the same. The export method will be quick. The format will be SQL. And then what you want to do is you want to push go. Okay. And what has happened behind the scenes is an SQL file has been created. It's named registrar.sql. In just a few moments, we're going to open up that file in NetBeans, but what it contains is the SQL to create this registrar database, to create the course table in the database, and then to insert that record of data into the table. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to save the file, and for me the file is going to automatically be saved in my downloads directory, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it over into another folder and then open it up from within NetBeans. But let me first go out into my downloads directory. Okay, and hopefully if I scroll down a little bit to where the zip files are, or maybe I might have to refresh things. Give me just 1 second to refresh. Oh, it's not a zip file, I'm sorry. It is a text, an SQL file, so I was looking for the wrong thing. Give me just 1 second. And it will be named registrar. There it is at the bottom. Registrar.sql. So the file that gets generated is a .sql file, and it should be named the same as your database. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this file, okay, over into my folder for this course, just to make it easier for me to open it up in NetBeans. Okay, I'm going to copy it over into my folder for this course. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into NetBeans and I'm going to open up that file. There it is, registrar.sq. I'm going to open it up into an editor in NetBeans. Let me bring it up to the top so we can see it better. And this is the contents of the file. Okay, and what it contains is, this is SQL, okay, this is the SQL to create the registrar database, okay, or the course table, I'm sorry, the course table in the registrar database. This is the SQL to insert that record of data into the table, and I may have scrolled past it. Let me scroll up. Yes. No, it actually doesn't contain the SQL to create the database itself. I thought it did, but it doesn't. But it does have the SQL to create the table, the course table, in the registrar database, and also the SQL to insert a record of data into the table. Okay, so what I would like you to do right now is take a screenshot of this SQL. Okay, take a screenshot of this SQL. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the phpMyAdmin tool. Okay, and we're going to go out into our registrar database, and what we're going to do is we're going to drop this table, but we're going to create it again. The second time though, when we create it, okay, we're going to use a different mechanism to create it. Okay, but first of all, let's drop the table. So select the table and then just push drop, and you're going to get a pop-up that looks something similar to this, and take a screenshot of this first. Okay, but then what I'd like to ask you to do is push OK and drop the table, and you can see that the table is now gone. Okay, so the table is gone. But what we're going to do is we're going to create it again. This time though, using that SQL that was generated, okay, by the phpMyAdmin tool. Okay. So at the top of this page, what I would like you to do is push the SQL button, and it's going to bring you to a page that looks something similar to this. And what you can do in this page is you can run raw SQL queries. And that's what this is. This is an SQL query to create a table in a database. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to copy well, I guess we're not going to, well, yeah, let's copy the entire create statement. Okay, the entire create statement. Okay, starting off with the words that say create table and going the whole way down to the semicolon. Copy that, and then go back into the phpMyAdmin tool in this large text area and paste it. And I apologize for the font being so small. Okay, but what we're going to do now is we're going to run that query, and what's going to happen is our course table is going to be created again. Okay, so I'm going to push on go, and you can see on this page we've just created a table. Okay, I'd like you to take a screenshot of this page, and you can see the table. There's the course table again. Now it doesn't have any data in it yet, okay, but we're going to run another SQL query to insert a record of data into the table. So I'd like you to push the SQL button again. It's going to bring up this page with the large text area. But then go back into NetBeans where we have this .sql file open. And then what I'd like to ask you to do is scroll down below to where it says insert into. And I'd like you to copy this entire SQL statement. This is another SQL query that we're going to run in the phpMyAdmin tool. It's a query that's going to insert a record of data into the course table. So I'd like you to copy this statement, go back into the phpMyAdmin tool and paste it, and now we're going to execute it. So this is a raw SQL query to insert a record of data into the course table. So push the go button, and there we've inserted a record of data into the table. Okay, so take a screenshot of this page as well. Okay, so there are different ways that you can go about creating tables, inserting data into tables, for that matter even updating data, deleting data from a table. Okay, you can do that using the full-blown, I'll say, graphical user interface, okay, where you plug and chug values, okay, or you can use this more raw approach where you plug in SQL queries and then execute them. Okay, but now what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to delete this table again. So we're going to select the course table and we're going to drop it. Okay, and then in the left hand side of the phpMyAdmin tool at the very top, there's a button that has a house on it. If you put your cursor over it, it says home. I'd like you to push that. It takes you back to the home page. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to push the databases button. We're going to select our register our database, and then we're going to drop it. So we're going to drop the entire database. At the bottom there's a drop button. I'd like you to push that drop button and then get a screenshot of this. Get a screenshot of this and then push on OK. And now we've dropped the entire database. Okay, so we've used the phpMyAdmin tool to create a database, add a table to the database, insert a couple of records of data, update a record of data, delete a record of data, then we deleted the entire table, and then we recreated the table using a more raw approach, actually executing SQL statements. And we inserted data executing raw SQL statements. Then we dropped the data again, we dropped the table, and we dropped the entire database. Okay, so this is a phpMyAdmin tool. It should give you a pretty good feel for its different functions and its different facilities. Okay, now what I would like you to do is create, and you're going to be submitting this as part of your assignment, I would like you to create a database named ABC_corporation. And then in that database, I would like you to create an employee table. Okay, the employee table is going to have a column named employee_ID. It's going to be an integer, and it will accept as many as 10 characters, and it's going to be the primary key in the table. The table is going to have a column for first_name. It's going to be a varchar, and it's going to be 50 characters. There's going to be another column for last_name. It's going to be a varchar, and it can be 50 characters in length. There'll be a column named telephone_number. That will be a varchar. It will be 25 characters, and this particular column can be left null. It can be left null. Okay. The last column in the table is the email underscore address column. It's a varchar, it can be 25 characters, and it can be left null as well. Now you might be wondering, what is this diagram that I'm pointing to on the right hand side of the slide? This is called an entity relationship diagram, and in class this week we're going to be talking a lot about entity relationship diagrams and how to create them. And as a matter of fact, I'm even going to have you create some entity relationship diagrams. But it's basically a diagram that illustrates the contents of a table, the columns that exist in a table. Okay? It gives you the names of the columns, their type, how many characters they may contain, whether or not a column is a primary key, whether or not a column may be left null or not. Okay, and that's what's illustrated in this diagram. So I want you to set up this table, and by the way, the employee ID column, it should auto increment as well. In addition to being the primary key, it should auto increment. After you've created the table, I would like you to insert one record of data into it, one row of data. The employee ID will be 1. The first name will be John. The last name will be Doe. The telephone number will be 555-555-5555. And the email address will be jdoe@gmail.com. Then after you get that record of data inserted, what I would like you to do is export the entire ABC Corporation database to an SQL file, and you will be uploading that .SQL file as part of this assignment. Okay, and that concludes this YouTube tutorial. Good luck with the creation of the ABC Corporation database. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know. Thanks a lot.